The following is a conversation between participants in Group 7. This podcast discusses the topic of groupthink categorized into 3 subsections: personality types, political issues, and prevention.
Imagine this scenario. You are sitting at dinner with your family, and Uncle John brings up the current presidential election. He starts clearly siding with one candidate, and the rest of the family joins in. You may not agree, but you find yourself nodding in agreement. You've just found yourself participating in groupthink. Groupthink is a phenomenon where it is as if every individual's mind has been merged into one.
Each of us looked at 4 different studies. The first study was done by Matty Flowers, and he looked at 2 different types of leadership, which are open and closed. Open leaders give opportunities for others to give input and for the whole group to have an open discussion without first mentioning their own opinions. And it's important to open leaders for everyone to speak their mind and actively participate. On the other hand, closed leaders don't allow for any discussion and simply just want the team members to agree with their idea. Each leader worked with 3 participants, and they were each given a crisis situation in which they needed to make a decision about how to handle it in 30 minutes. The results showed that open leader teams had significantly more proposed solutions and considered significantly more of the available facts when coming to a solution. Okay, so based off of that study, do y'all have any real life examples of how that comes into play?
So I think that this would be like, when you have a group project and there's that one person that just automatically is like the leader and they want to take charge, and it comes to the point where you have to decide on like a project topic, and you could tell nobody else is excited about whatever the leader comes up with, and you just kind of go with it.
That happens all the time, and I hate that, because then even if I don't want to do it, I always give in because they look so excited about it, and they just are they're the only one that's taking initiative, so I feel bad if I go and no, I don't want to do that. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, you don't want to disrupt the harmony.
So this would be an example of a closed leadership role. But recently, especially in our group, we had more of an open leadership role going on. We asked everyone's opinion, and we did pros and cons for each unit project option, and really just came to an agreement that we all liked and felt comfortable with.
So we all had a say in what we wanted to do as far as which project and what to do the topic on.
And I think it was way more beneficial, and maybe closed leadership would be more beneficial in a different situation, but in this situation, open was definitely better.
In the next study, researcher Philip Tetlock looked at studies previously done by Janus and Flowers. Looking to further understand their findings, Tetlock studied archival records of historical policy crisis statements made by political figures like President Truman, John F. Kennedy, Lyndon B. Johnson, and many other decision makers. Tetlock coded the statements for integrative complexity, which deals with the degree of complexity that decision makers view policies. Basically, this means that a low score in integrative complexity would be indicative of groupthink leaders having a more simplistic understanding of political policies. The researcher also used an evaluative assertion analysis to code for positive or negative references to in-groups and out-groups made by the decision maker. The study found that groupthink decision makers perceived policies on a more basic level than non-groupthink decision makers. It was also found that groupthink decision makers referred to their own group more positively.
This totally reminds me of my politics and society class, when one person shares their opinion about the upcoming election, and you can see that people disagree. Like my roommate, who obviously disagrees, but she doesn't raise her hand to say she disagrees. She just kind of keeps quiet and basically is nodding in agreement.
That's got to be kind of cool to know her opinion, but see that she's totally going along with the groupthink and doesn't want to even give her opinion because she knows that it's going to cause an upheaval or whatever. I think that's a cool point of view that you have.
Yeah, you're the only one that notices that she's keeping to herself. Everyone else might just think that she doesn't really have an opinion or anything,
or that she agrees with the group.
Yeah.
So as far as the current presidential election, can you think of any examples of groupthink that might be happening right now?
Relating back to the study that you looked at, talking about simplistic ideas, the wall that is being mentioned in the current election, it's such a simplistic idea. No one really knows much about it, but they're either really in favor of it or really against it.
Which is crazy because it is such a it's a very simplified version of border control and immigration. It's totally not even a fully full-rounded understanding of any of those concepts.
Right. In the next study conducted by Chin and Associates, we're looking again at leadership style as well as implementing the role of devil's advocate. The 2 leadership styles examined were directive and participative. Directive is similar to a closed leadership style like in Flowers' study, while participative is more like a closed leadership style. Similar to Flowers' studies, the use of Confederates as leaders, but Chin also utilized a Confederate to play the part of devil's advocate. Participants were divided into groups consisting of around 5 or 6 people, including the Confederates. And some groups had a directive leader and a devil's advocate, some had a participative leader and a devil's advocate, and others only had one type of leader with no advocate. Groups were given a survival situation in which they had to come up with a solution within 30 minutes. In the first 2 minutes, the directive leader let the group know what his preferred solution was, while the participative leader did the opposite. If there was a devil's advocate present, they would challenge the leader's solution. Consistent with Flowers' findings, this study also found that directive leadership resulted in significantly worse decisions than participative leaders because of groupthink. However, there were no significant results regarding the use of a devil's advocate.
So I'm immediately reminded of how in college there's so many opportunities for there to be a devil's advocate, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So the first thing I think of is going downtown on a Thursday night when you know you have a test at 8 a.m.
Such a bad decision.
It's always a bad decision, but regardless of whether there's someone saying, hey, here's what you've got going on, I know that your friends are going out and they're trying to get you to go out and you're all for it, think about the consequences and think about what might happen if you don't go out and what might happen if you do.
I feel like people always end up going out regardless, even though they know that they have a test, just because so many people are trying to get them to go out because they're like, come on, you're gonna have way more fun, stuff like that.
Right. So then that would prove the results that they were devil's advocate doesn't always work.
Right.
Another failed example of devil's advocate is my friend who stole a golf cart. She was with a group of people and everyone was encouraging her to do it. And she's like, nah, I don't think I really want to. But in the end, she did end up stealing it and she got in a bunch of trouble for it.
So she kind of played her own devil's advocate and it didn't even work.
Yeah, I guess so.
Oh, well.
In a case study by Bergen and Kirk, the president of a company held a meeting to discuss putting a flexible work hours program in place. He discussed the program with 9 lower-level employees. The way he stated the idea was as if he had already made up his mind about what a good idea the program was and just wanted people to agree with him, which is pretty much what happened. While some people would disagree out of earshot of the president, the employees either agreed or did not say anything at all. The study did a good job of showing the symptoms and occurrences of groupthink, and also went on to discuss ways to prevent groupthink. The 7 types of groupthink prevention in the study were leader encouragement, diversity of viewpoints, legitimized disagreement and skepticism, idea generation versus idea evaluation, advantages and disadvantages of each solution, new approaches and new people, and lastly, examination of group processes.
I feel like a good idea would be to go through each of those examples and give a way that may prevent that groupthink. Do you want to go in with yours?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can start. So the one that I wanted to talk about was the one with the devil's advocate, because it is commonly understood that a devil's advocate is going to prevent groupthink, but as we've shown, particularly in college, it doesn't necessarily work. So maybe a way that we can kind of prevent it from happening is by coming up with new approaches, or even hanging out with new people that will come up with new approaches to things, as opposed to just telling you, hey, that's not a good idea to go out at 11 o'clock on a Thursday when you have a test.
Gives you a new perspective, and
yeah.
you respect that person more or something.
Yeah,
or just
absolutely.
Think their idea is better.
For sure.
And yeah, with the politics and society example, a way to prevent people from not sharing their opinions would be have the whole class write down their vote or their opinion on a certain subject and take a poll when you get all the decisions in.
In elementary school when you put your head down and raise your hand.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's applicable, but that's what I always think of.
For the personality one and our group project, I feel we did a good job of preventing groupthink with making sure everyone has a say in what they want to talk about, and giving opinions, making sure everyone, you say, hey, do you like this idea, and not just assuming that everyone agrees with you and wants to do that.
That's about it for this podcast from Group 7 on Unit 1. We hope you've enjoyed talking about groupthink, and we'll see you next time.